You're listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
Good morning, I'm Chrissie De Clerck-Szilagyi.
And I'm Jason Szilagyis with today's Caffeinated History with the Szilagyis on the BQN Podcast Collective.
Before we jump into our topic for the day, we'd like to take a moment to thank our BQN Patreon patrons who make this show possible. Listeners, you can hear your name listed here as one of our associate producers with a monthly subscription of just $10 at patreon.com/BQN. And with a monthly Patreon subscription of $5 or more, you can join in our Star Trek script table reads and other fun Patreon member activities. Watch your Patreon messages for details. Today's topic is the history of the gummy bear. In movie theaters and video rental stores, if you are like me and old enough to remember those, across the world, there's one candy that is sure to be found: gummy bears. These sweet and chewy treats are surprisingly just a little over a century old. The company that invented them, Haribo, is still one of the largest producers of gummy candy worldwide. Haribo began in 1920, with owner Hans Riegel working out of his home in Bonn, Germany. The company's name is a combination of his and the city's, Ha-Ri-Bo. He and his wife, Gertrude, started with hard candies, which they sold at local fairs and other events, and delivered to order via Gertrude's bicycle. After 2 years of good but not great business, they decided to try making a soft candy, which they molded into the shape of dancing bears. They were immediately popular. Soft candies like these were not new. Turkish Delight had existed for centuries, and more recently, wine gums, jujubes, and Chuckles candies were popular in Britain and the United States. It seems there was just something about those little bears that made the candy all the better. By the 1930s, the company employed 400 people and sold their candy across Germany. However, the Great Depression and World War II took their toll. The candy remained popular, but the needed ingredients became harder and harder to come by. Also, Hans and Gertrude's sons, Hans Jr. and Paul, were absent from the company for most of the war, as they were first in the German army and then in an American POW camp. Then Hans Sr. died in March of 1945. Gertrude ran the company for a while after her husband's death, but by the end of the war they had only 30 employees and were producing very little candy. The company reinvented itself post-war, with the sons running it. They were soon even more successful than before. They made a slight design change on the bears, shortening their limbs to make the familiar cute shape we see to this day. They called these new candies Goldbarren or Gold Bears. The Gold Bears were trademarked for Haribo in Germany in 1967. After the closure of the Berlin Wall in 1961, gummy bears became a very sought-after item in East Germany. They also started to gain popularity in the U.S. as servicemen and women sent them home as gifts to family and friends. Many American children got their first taste of gummy bears in German language classes in the 1960s and 70s as an example of an authentic German food. By this time, other companies were making gummy candies. Jelly Belly in particular was cornering the U.S. market, prompting Haribo to open up offices in the U.S. in 1982. Haribo doesn't own the gummy bear concept. Their specific design is trademarked, but other companies can make gummy bears without infringing on it. However, according to a 2012 decision in a lawsuit between them and the Lindt Chocolate Company, Haribo does get the credit for inventing the gummy bear. Thanks for listening. We'd also like to thank our History with the Szilagyis Patreon patrons: Vince Locke, Susan Capuzzi-De Clerck, Laura Dull, Kris Hill, Betty Larson, and Pati. Their contributions help us to have the time to research and write what you're hearing. You can help us just like they do with a monthly subscription at patreon.com/historywiththeszilagyis. Also, thank you to Mark White for the awesome show art and Zach Tripp for the wonderful closing music. Please subscribe in your favorite podcast player and don't forget to rate and review us there as well. And while you're at it, check out the rest of the great shows on the BQN Collective. Lastly, we'd love to hear what you think. If you'd like to reach out, you can find our network on the various socials at BQN Podcasts, and this podcast in particular at History Szilagy. You can also talk about any and all of the BQN podcasts in our Facebook group, the BQN Collective, and in our Discord. And last but not least, you can find me on the socials at The Goddess Livia. That's TheGoddessLivia.
And me at Jason Dark Elf. We'd love to hear topic suggestions. What would you like to learn on Caffeinated History?